Morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I just wanted to play that video as you were kind of coming in and getting settled because I think it really sets the tone for what we're going to be talking about today. For anyone who doesn't know me, my name's Holly Grimes. I use she, her pronouns. For anyone who can't see me, I'm wearing a white t-shirt today, some blue trousers, some white trainers. I'm a white woman and I wear glasses, so I feel like I should take them off so it's not as nerve-wracking and I can't see you all. But yeah, great to see you all. Today we're going to be talking about sport. So why does sport matter in a movement for movement? And what role can we all play to create safe, inclusive and welcoming spaces for all? We've got a fantastic panel with us this morning who'll be talking us through their experiences, learnings, top tips, and we'll look ahead to the possibilities if we are successful in unlocking sports potential in enabling active lives for all. Now, sport for me has played a huge role in my life. My football-loving dad couldn't wait to get me that first pair of football boots, and I've honestly never looked back since that point. A lack of girls' football teams in my area meant that playing with the boys until my teenage years was the only option, and that wasn't always easy, but it only toughened me up and fueled my desire to work towards a better future where everyone can enjoy sport and has equal opportunities to do so. We've come a long way since then. I finally got a kit that actually fits me for one, and sport has given me and continues to give me so many opportunities. Lifelong friendships, opportunities to travel with teammates, the ups and downs of winning trophies and losing penalty shootouts, and the joy of movement through so many different sports and activities. It's given me skills, opportunities to grow and develop, lifted me up when things feel difficult, and above all, created safe spaces for me to be and find my authentic self as a player, a coach, a volunteer, and a leader. The impact sports had on me has been truly transformational, and without these experiences, I can confidently say I wouldn't be stood here today hosting this session and speaking to all of you. We know that sport can be the lifeblood of communities. There are so many fantastic organisations and people doing important work in this space, from grassroots and community clubs, powered by volunteers, through to national organisations and everything in between. Alongside movement and physical activity, sport can and does play a key role in supporting people to be more active in ways that work for them. Sport is continuously evolving to create safe, inclusive spaces for everyone. Doors are beginning to open, and there's such a huge potential to welcome more and a greater diversity of people into sport. And I want more people to be able to enjoy the sense of community, escapism, and belonging that sport has always given me and so many others. Unfortunately, we know that this isn't the case for everyone. Whilst 14% of our active minutes come through traditional sport, Active Life survey data for Greater Manchester tells us that inequalities still exist and that there are people in communities who feel unable to take part in or excluded from sport. This includes lower socioeconomic groups, disabled people and people with long-term health conditions, women and girls, people outside of the workforce, some parts of the LGBTQ+ community, and ethnic minority groups who all take part in less traditional sport than their peers. We know that many of these groups and communities are also less likely to experience the benefits of being part of a sports club and to volunteer in sport and physical activity. And where multiple inequalities exist and overlap, the data paints an even starker picture. Ultimately, too many people are currently unable to access the transformational impact that sport can have on our lives. So the challenge is clear. How can we collectively grow and sustain a more inclusive sports system? One that gives people the flexibility to play, volunteer, lead, and engage in their way. I'm really looking forward to diving into this with our fantastic panel. We'll also have some time towards the end for questions. So as the panel are talking, please submit any questions you have as they pop into your head via the QR code on screen, and we'll come to these towards the end of the session. I'm also delighted to be joined by my co-host Sally today, so she'll introduce herself in a moment, and she's going to be helping us kind of draw out some key questions and points as we go. So yeah, coming over to our panel now, let's explore how we can address some of these challenges together. I've spoken already around why sport matters to me, but as they introduce themselves, we're first going to hear about what is most important to our panel about sport and why. So Sally, do you want to kick us off as I'm making my way over?
Look at that. Hello. Good morning still, everybody. We're still in the morning. My name's Sally Khan. I use she and they pronouns, and I'll just do a quick introduction, if that's okay. So today I'm wearing some blue jeans and a really beautiful cream shirt with lemons on. Yes, I am. I'm a Romani gypsy, but I'm a white passing person. I'm also a queer person and a disabled person. And as I've got older and my disability becomes progressively worse, what I found is I've had to change my relationship with sport and movement and physical activity. But what I've found is really great is outdoor swimming in lakes and rivers and all sorts of things become really manageable. And of course, if you do it in the correct way, you take a float with you, which is brilliant because you can just float. And what helps me as well is if, like me, you've got one of these watches that bullies you and tells you to move, then that's good because it encourages me. A little reminder that get up and have a little wander about.
Thanks, Sally. I think we'll start down this end. So, Finn, do you want to kick us off?
Technical issues. Hi, folks. My name is Finn. My pronouns are he and they, and I am the Policy and Research Manager at LGBT Foundation. We've recently partnered with GM Moving to do some research into the experiences of trans and non-binary people accessing sort of activities, movement and sports across Greater Manchester, so that's why I'm here today, to give you some of those insights. In terms of a bit of a visual description, I'm a kind of short white dude. I'm wearing a black t-shirt, black jeans, and kind of a black and orange plaid shirt, because I'm nothing if not an emo at heart. And I've kind of got short blonde hair, which is in need of rebleaching. In terms of what I get from sport, what I enjoy about sport, for me, I think it's really an important opportunity to just find joy in my body. I think I'm hopefully not alone in this, but for many, many years, I thought sports was kind of an onerous thing that you had to really hate, but you did anyway. I did Couch to 5K, and I kind of hated it, to be honest. I hate running. I've discovered this about myself. But when I kind of realized that, oh, actually, this is something I can find fun and joy in, that's when I kind of really understood how to enjoy myself. So yeah, I think for me, sports is about fun and finding joy.
Morning all, Prashesh Patel, Sport, Leisure, Wellbeing Service Manager at Oldham Council, part of our public health team. For those who can't see me in the room or online, I'm an Indian man, or British man with Indian heritage. I've got brown skin, brown eyes. I'd like to say short black hair and a beard, but if I'm honest, it's black and grey. And I'm wearing black jeans, a navy top, a polo top, and I've got my active soles on. Sport, I think for me, is really, really important. It brings people together. It brings a lot of joy to people. Sometimes that's on an individual level, like Holly was talking about. Sometimes that's on a team level. But what I love about sport, thinking about from a really early age on a personal level, I think it teaches you so many life skills. It goes beyond sport. How to win, how to lose, how to work with others. How to communicate, it teaches us so many different things. And when we think about the panel this morning about talking about school sports and maybe reinvesting more into there, I do think sport can teach us so many different things about life. I still remember as a child lots of really fond memories of sport, really happy times, but also challenging times when our team lost. Sometimes not taking that well, but learning how to deal with that. So yeah, I think sport for me brings people together, but it also teaches a lot of things as well.
Amazing. Thanks, Pritesh. Khadija?
Hi, everyone. My name is Khadija. I'm born and bred in Bolton. I identify as a Muslim woman. I'm wearing all black. I have blue hair. I'm joking. I don't have blue hair. I have black hair, in case anyone's wondering. Not that there's anything wrong with having blue hair. What does sport mean to me? So, born and bred in Bolton, and I run a community group, youth group, Crims Girls Youth Group. We predominantly work with Muslim women and girls. But now we do a lot of stuff with dads and lads and boys. We've kept the girls in the name still, because there's a lot more money out there for women and girls, we know. What does sport mean to me? Well, coming from a big family of 6 sisters, my dad didn't really have much of a choice but to let us go out and do stuff. Well, he did, but he was quite overruled with everybody, with all our hormones, should I say. But yeah, having been sporting myself in my younger days, now I've come to realize that we were quite the lucky ones in our family, but not everybody was. And so we want to make that change and try to make that change, and still trying to make that change in 2025. So myself personally, I'm a football coach, a cricket coach, an archery instructor, a cycle leader, a netball coach, hoping to do a few others, but more for me is about educating others to know that, you know, it is okay. Muslim women and girls are not hard to reach, and we do want to have access to sports just like our peers.
Brilliant. Thanks, Khadija. And last but not least, Shannon.
Thank you very much. Not sure how I'm meant to follow that one. But hi, everyone. My name is Shannon Howarth, Participation Manager at UK Deaf Sport. So we're a charity looking to support deaf people to be active, right from grassroots level all the way to elite sport. My pronouns are she, her, and for people who can't see me or online, I'm wearing a beige t-shirt, black trousers, and a watch that's actually died, but is actually hiding a really embarrassing tan line from the Manchester Sun this weekend. What does sport mean to me? I think really resonated with everything that everyone said on the panel today. My journey is quite similar to Holly's, that football has been a massive part of my life growing up. And the thing for me for sport is it brings people together from all walks of life that you may never interact with otherwise, and creates that sense of belonging and that safe space for people to be active together in any format or any sport that they choose to do. And I think everyone knows in this room it's our role to make sure that everyone can see sport as that safe place and a place for belonging.
Absolutely, yeah, and just so amazing to have a fantastic panel with us, so many different perspectives. Yeah, it's going to be a great conversation. So, you know, we can see from the data from Active Lives that some people and communities do unfortunately feel less able to take part in sport and to experience some of those benefits that we've just mentioned. Why do you think this is? What are some of the kind of sticky challenges and barriers for the people and communities that you work with and that you see in your work? So I think if we start this end, maybe with Shannon, if you kick us off.
Yeah, definitely. I think for us at UK Deaf Sport, the biggest challenges we see are communication challenges for a lot of the deaf community. So we work with people who have any form of hearing loss or deafness. So just want to say it's fantastic that, you know, we put provision in place today for interpreters, but we see that that's not always something that's available for people to take part in sport and physical activity. So they're seeing challenges or perceived challenges before they've turned up to sessions. I think to go on from that, a lack of deaf role models in sport is a massive one for us. And I'd actually like to ask the audience a question really quickly. Has anyone ever heard of the Deaf Olympics? A few people. Oh, a few hands. So the Deaf Olympics is part of the Olympic family, taking place in November this year. But as you'll see in the room, there's a few people who know about it, not many people, but they are our deaf athletes who are performing on the world stage. But not many people are aware, and that's the same within the deaf community. So we're finding that children, deaf children growing up, aren't seeing those role models in the sport and seeing sport as a place for them. Through that. So yeah, a lack of role models is a massive one for us. And also obviously the communication challenges that may come, or perceived challenges that people face.
Yeah, fantastic. Khadija?
Where do I start? The list is endless, but we're getting there, working with partners. So many barriers and challenges, and myself personally that I faced as a Muslim woman growing up in Bolton. And you know, they are still apparent. Not having a safe space, female-only provision, especially. You know, we'll have, you know, the council are great putting on female-only swimming sessions, but with a male lifeguard, like, that's not going to work. You know, we need to have, you know, the correct measures in place. Female-only sessions with a female lifeguard, female-only spaces. Representation is a big one. We need coaches and leaders, instructors that look like you, you know, sound like you know, that can relate to you. Oh, hang on a minute, she wears a hijab, she wears a niqab, she does her GCSEs, she's a volunteer and a coach. We can do the same. So to have that role model system, like Shannon said, it's really important. A space for prayer. You know, Muslim people, you know, they need that space, especially in the winter time where they're going to sessions, coaching sessions, and just to have that little bit of consideration that it might be, you know, fasting time, Ramadan, just to have that consideration. You know, transport costs, you know, the cost of living is rising. We don't want anything to be a barrier. So, you know, we always reaching out to people, partners, you know, to foster support. You know, we just very luckily this week, secured ourselves with funding a minibus to support people to get to A to B, especially with girls. Parents are very reluctant to send their children, especially their girls, to places. And now that we've got the provision, the girls will get there because they know they're going to be in a safe environment with a female coach, with a female driver, with other people that they know, to get to their place to do the activities. So yeah, the list is quite big, but I'll stop there, giving the other guys a chance.
Thanks, Khadija. Pritesh?
Yeah, so I think summed up really well from colleagues over there, but I guess in Oldham, where I work, some of our residents face the biggest inequalities, the big areas of deprivation and inequalities faced. So I think from our point of view, those of us who are professionals in the room, who work for local authorities or organisations like that, I guess it's just really understanding that the people that we're trying to help face other priorities, other inequalities, other challenges, and we really need to understand that. Sometimes we need to help them tackle those inequalities before we even think about physical activity, movement, sport. So I know some of the conversations when we're going into our communities and engaging and building relationships, we don't really even talk about sport or physical activity to start with. We just go and find out what's important to them. Sometimes that could be feeding the family, heating the home. These are real inequalities that some of our Greater Manchester residents and Oldham residents face. So how do we help them tackle those inequalities first? My role might be in public health and in physical activity and movement, but actually, can I help those residents find support to tackle those inequalities? Because if we don't help those residents face those challenges first and tackle them, they're not going to think about physical activity and sport. The other thing I guess to think about is when we specifically talk about sport rather than just movement, how do we, I guess, help our residents experience some of those different sports? How does anyone in our communities or in our room love cycling or love golf or any other kind of sport without having tried it? So how do we help them try it in a place that suits them and I guess where they feel comfortable and safe? We talked about safety this morning. And how do they enjoy it? Maybe it's a sport for them and they can pick it up from there.
So I think before we even discuss barriers for LGBTQ plus people in sports and movement, we have to address the fact that often our experiences aren't being collected. So things like the Active Lives survey are really good, but they don't necessarily go into any detail around kind of specific LGBTQ plus inequalities or particularly trans and non-binary inequalities. And that's why it's really, really important that we're doing really inclusive demographic monitoring in our organizations, in our services, because if our experiences, our voices, our barriers aren't counted, then they don't count for anything, really. In terms of some of the specific barriers, what I want to get across to you today is that the barriers that LGBTQ plus people face in sports and movement are largely the same as everybody else because we have those intersectional identities. So we know, for instance, that trans and non-binary people are more likely to rent, more likely to live in poverty, and therefore have suppressed incomes, and that can be a barrier in terms of cost. Similarly, the cost of public transport and also safety on public transport if services and activities aren't necessarily in their local area. We also know that LGBTQ plus and trans and non-binary people are more likely to be disabled or neurodivergent, or both. So facilities that aren't physically or sensorily accessible can be an issue. And we also know that LGBTQ plus people, and particularly trans and non-binary people, might face issues with self-esteem and body confidence, and quote-unquote uniform policies or kind of dress expectations in facilities, as well as the way that those facilities are advertised and branded can be an issue. So, if you're not including diverse body types, weights, visibly trans people in your adverts, then we're going to think that space isn't for me. We also know from some of the research that we've been conducting with GM Moving that of the trans and non-binary people in Greater Manchester that we surveyed, 41% of them had experienced discrimination in an activity space or a sports facility. Most of that coming from either other patrons of that service or the staff in that service themselves. And I think some of that has to do with exclusionary national governing policies that kind of trickle down to a grassroots level, but I think some of it is just around basic education. So all of those are kind of key barriers that our communities face.
Thanks. Thanks so much, everybody. What a diverse range of lenses we've heard today. What a privilege to hear them as well, and thanks so much for sharing them with us. And of course, you touched there as well, in some, about the whole person, that we're more than that one aspect of our identity. There are other considerations that need to be made. So whilst that lens has been turned out, we've heard that now, I want to turn it back. I want a mirror up to us. And I want to come around the panel, please. I want to ask you, for us as practitioners, what kind of attitude do we need to go into this work with to make the changes that are needed? So anybody like to start us off on that mirror? What kind of attitude do we need to have for this work so that our practitioners have got a starting point? Anybody want to start us off?
Everyone needs to listen. You need to be willing to listen. And, you know, we've said it before, be bold and be brave and ask the questions. And I find that people feel that they can't reach out. People feel that we're hard to reach. Honestly, we're not. Just come out. And that term, it just gets me. You know, hard to reach communities. No, we're not hard to reach. Come talk to us, have a conversation, let's do some learning together, and that's where we are as an organisation. Yes, we've got all this delivery happening, and we are quite blessed. We are, you know, engaging with a lot of NGBs and sports, but it's higher up. They don't know what's going on at grassroots, and they don't know what the needs are. So come and visit us, come and see, and not just our group, but just generally, come and see the delivery, speak to us, talk to us. So yeah, learn from us, and, you know, ask the questions. How can we make it better? What kind of facilities do you need? What can we do to support?
Brilliant, thank you. So absolutely key point about listening, not assuming, and then finding out more through that listening as well, placing yourselves in communities to do that. Thank you so much.
I think for me, as practitioners, we need to be comfortable with embracing change. So when we're going in and working with a group, and it's really important, we're listening to what they want from sport and physical activity, but understanding that might change as we go through, and understanding people's values might change throughout their journey within sport as well. So not too much focusing at the beginning on that end goal of what we're trying to get at, but really thinking about that might change throughout, and that's okay, and we need to be comfortable with that. And I think that also comes from not just practitioners, but funders as well, thinking about, you know, sometimes there's such strict criteria with different funding, but thinking about how can we actually use that funding and repurpose that to be comfortable with change throughout the programme. And it may look a little bit different from that initial bid that's gone into a funder, but the outcomes will be so much better.
That's brilliant, thanks. So, change making change. Perfect. Thank you so much.
I think picking up on what Shannon just said there, I think it's really important around the funding. You know, in Oldham, through the place partnership work, we had some community investment funding previously, but we wanted to do things differently. You know, rather than a big application form, or, you know, some of our groups aren't comfortable with application forms and things like that. So we just decided to do something called like an ideas fund. There are loads of, like Khadija talks about, loads of rich ideas in our communities of things that they want to do to either to play sport or improve their health and well-being. So we just did an ideas fund, and through Action Together, our colleagues, our VCSE kind of umbrella organisation, they just spoke with groups and residents and community leaders like Khadija and go, what would help you in your community to be more active? So some of that learning is around investment. How do we get it into our communities in a better way? So the way we did it in Oldham was just develop that idea with the person, help them fill out that form, and by the time it got to panel, it was correct. You know, it wasn't a black or white yes or no, or there was a little bit of feedback to work with them to build up the idea. Also in Oldham, we're an active through football area. So, you know, we're fortunate to be on the local pilot and place partnership journey for quite a while. And some of that learning is around working alongside our communities in groups like CRIMS in Bolton and things like that. What's important to them? How do they want to do things? Really, really on their terms, some of that learning. And just to back up what Khadija says, you know, some of the learning that's come out through the work that we've done, it's that active listening, that engagement. I have stopped using the word consultation, because consultation to me suggests it stops, it starts, it's sometimes on my terms, where what we tend to do now is just engage. Just if it was a group like Crims in Bolton, engage with them, talk to them continuously, find out what happens. Things change. There may be something that group wants this week that is different in a couple of weeks' time, but we don't know that unless you're continually engaging and listening and learning. So I think that's some of the learning over the journey that we've gone on so far.
Brilliant. So that openness to learning, creativity, not assuming what's best. Absolutely. A re-emphasis of listening, almost an invitation to Crims to set up in Oldham. Did you hear that? You did, yeah, good. Okay.
Wow, yeah, thanks, folks. So I think what's been really interesting in the research that we've done so far is this discrepancy between what our communities actually need versus what the organisations serving them think they need. So we surveyed trans and non-binary people across Greater Manchester, and we also surveyed sports and leisure organisations across Greater Manchester. And I think what came across quite clearly in that research is often in an organisation, you'll have one active ally or one LGBTQ plus person who decides to take up the mantle of inclusion. And that's great, but they don't necessarily have the expertise to be able to deliver that in the most inclusive way. Often they're not paid for that work, and they can't speak to the experiences of the kind of width of our communities because they don't have the lived experience that kind of speaks to the level of inclusion within communities. So to give you an example of this, in one of the focus groups we did, a trans person told us about an experience they had at a trans-inclusive swimming event where they'd come along, they'd gotten into the pool and they began swimming, and the lifeguard actually asked them to leave because they were swimming with a pool noodle. And the person explained, due to their disability, they needed to be able to swim with that pool noodle. They're a very strong swimmer. They've swam a 2K before, but they just need that accessibility accommodation. And the lifeguard said, the kind of policies of that space didn't allow for that, and that person would have to leave. So you have a trans-inclusive space, but it's not disability inclusive. Similarly, we spoke to a lot of people who are parents or who have childcare responsibilities, and they spoke of the difficulties of finding a space that is both trans-inclusive and child-inclusive, right? So often they'd have activity spaces like parent and kid football, but they wouldn't be welcome in that space as a visibly trans person. And that's why I think co-production is so vitally important. You actually need to be speaking to the people in your local area about what they need. And as a really good example of this, the Alternative Football League here in Manchester, both North and South, are really, really great. It's a women-centered space, but it's all gender inclusive, and the leadership structure is really diverse, a good range of opinions in the mix. My team recently won the league, so I'm here to give a big up. So yeah, definitely check out AF League if you're interested in kind of finding more about that co-production model.
I'm not going to comment on where my team finished in the AF League. Yeah, we'll save that one.
Thank you so much. So there's something that's come through time and time again about an attitude that's about listening, that's starting where people are at, not where you're at, and being able to find out more, and that attitude, that open will to do that, because you get the better outcomes, change becomes possible, creativity becomes possible, but seeing the whole person, because they're more than a particular aspect of their identity that you're focusing on. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Some great learnings there. We've already touched on some of this, but sort of looking ahead, let's think about 10 years down the line. We want a really inclusive, diverse sports system. What's needed to create that change and the conditions for that change? And I think we'll start with Khadija this time. Again.
What's needed? Obviously, money is a big one. We need a lot of money to get things going. But we need spaces. I feel in Bolton, and especially where we're from, the Romworth ward, one of the most deprived wards in Bolton, there aren't enough facilities. And so, 10 years down the line, for me, it's about having them safe spaces, big spaces, where people can come in a safe environment, secluded environment, where they can be on their own doing their thing or with a team, whether it's a green space, an indoor space. So I'm just thinking 10 years down the line, that's where we need to be. We need 10 years down the line more coaches, more female coaches especially. Right now, we've been supported, like I said, we work with a lot of NGBs with the LTA, and one of the challenges that we've got is that there's no female coach developers. We've got a bank of women ready to become tennis coaches, but there's no female coach developer to come and do that. So we're hoping that in 10 years that will change, and not just in tennis, but in other sports too. So to have more women to come and teach other people and other women to become leaders and coaches and volunteers. So then, and again, representation, so to have more diverse coaches and Muslim coaches to be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. We know the role of the workforce is massive, and it's making sure that workforce is reflective of the people that they're working with, absolutely. Shannon?
Yeah, 100% agree with that, and we've got a real priority at UK Deaf Sport to try and support deaf people into those workforce roles, so we have that representation, because it's that saying, so if you can't see it, you can't be it. So really making sure that our workforce is representative of the people that we want to support to be active. I think we've touched on it a little bit here, but I'm hoping in 10 years' time, all our work has an intersectional approach embedded into it. And for us, we've started to do some of that work, so really lucky through the Sport England Movement Fund, we were able to support Bolton Deaf Society, who had a South Asian deaf women's group. And as part of that, although not sport, but the learnings can be taken, they started a walking group. A lot of the women had never been to the green spaces in Bolton before. And we empowered them to be able to go and visit those spaces. We gave them the walking boots needed. We gave them rain jackets. We worked with the leaders of that group so that they were comfortable to lead those sessions. And for us, the learnings have been massive, but not just from looking at the one inequality of deafness, but looking at that person more holistically and understanding the other challenges and inequalities they're facing to being active. So I think, for me, like I say, that intersectional approach being seen and embedded in all our learning, but also diving a little bit deeper into that. So for us, we hear about disability being an inequality, but we're working with deaf people who may have more than one impairment. So when we're looking at inequality, it might not just be deafness, it may be another impairment as well that causes challenges for them to be active and involved in sport. And how can we work across the whole sector, and for us in the disability sector, to create sessions that are not just deaf friendly, but also inclusive and accessible for people with other impairments as well.
It's brilliant. Thank you so much, both of you. Really important, that intersectionality, the diversity of the workforce, and then being able to poverty-proof, like you said, and expose people to those different spaces that they might not have otherwise been in, and providing the scaffolding to do that, because, often these things are difficult on your own, and you need other people to scaffold that support around you. But I'm also interested in the money, but I'm interested in this concept of resource weaving. So how do we work together with the resources that we've got so we can put a bit over here and a bit over here and have a better whole? So as we move into our next speakers, I wondered if you could also have a little think about this idea of resource weaving as we bring things together that make it better, so we can better serve workforce development, intersectionality, poverty proofing, and so on.
That's a nice little curveball. I guess, yeah, I think when I think about that weaving of investment and things like that, I guess collaboration is really, really important. Working with different partners, like I said, we're quite lucky in Oldham. We've been on the place partnership, the local pilot journey for quite a while, and we brought partners together along that time. We've built relationships, built trust. So I mentioned Action Together before. We've got Oldham Community Leisure, Oldham Active, our leisure provider. We've got community groups. We all tend to kind of come together to I guess, reduce inequalities, improve health and well-being. And when we talk through those lenses of tackling inequality, like this panel is about, and improving health and well-being, naturally physical activity and sport will come out. As I said earlier, physical activity sport has so many different benefits, but I think going back to the question you just asked, when we talk about collaboration and bringing people together, once you've built that trust and built that relationship, which does take time, you are more likely to get that kind of collective input of resource, whether that's financial, whether that's time, whether that's knowledge. I think that really helps. I guess the other thing looking forward, policy change will always make a difference. and whether it's the national, regional or local level, that will significantly make a big difference. And we look forward to seeing what investment potentially comes forward from a new government. And then I guess lastly, for me, I think we talk about movement for movement, and we talk about sport today specifically, but we know that sport has so many different benefits. So how do we champion, how do we fight the cause for that sport can make a difference in so many different priorities that people in areas have, whether that's climate change, whether that's improving health and well-being, loads of different things like that. How do we champion sport to tackle other people's priorities like educational attainment? You know, physical activity is proven to help there. How do we make, the evidence is all there, how do we champion it more moving forward? And the last thing I'd like to add is, you know, I think we've got a role to find more champions and advocates who look like those who face the biggest inequalities. We need to be able to support them to feel confident to be champions and to advocate and to talk about it's okay to cycle if you're from this community, or it's okay to play sport if you're facing other inequalities.
Yeah, I think just to echo kind of what's already been said, I think communication is so vitally important, as it is in all relationships, really. And to speak to your question about kind of resource weaving and sharing, there are so many LGBTQ+ organizations and grassroots groups who are ready and willing to offer support to organizations on this issue. We have a wealth of knowledge. We have a wealth of resources that we can share with you. We can offer training. We're ready and waiting for you to get in touch with us, essentially. And I think the other thing that we need to be doing more of is this co-production idea. So often the solutions to the specific inequalities that groups are facing are going to be specific to your locality and the facilities that you have access to. And you need to be consulting with LGBTQ+ people, and particularly trans and non-binary people in your local area specifically about what they actually need, because it's often going to be different than what you think they need, right? And I think as a final point on that, training is so valuable, and I would definitely encourage all organizations to participate in not only LGBTQ+ inclusion training, but specifically trans and non-binary inclusion training. And I'm not just saying that to plug the training that we'll be delivering in the summer. If you are interested in that, please do let me know. We can put you on the holding list. But also, training is only one part of that journey. It's often the start of that journey. And I think sometimes training can make us a bit complacent because we think that our job is done because we've had that learning and therefore we don't need to do anything to implement that. Whereas I would encourage you to really see that training as the start of your journey towards making your spaces, your facilities, your services safer and more inclusive for all.
Absolutely. Thank you, Finn. We've had some really, really good questions come in. I'm having a hard time sort of picking them out, but one's just stood out that I'm just going to ask you specifically, Finn, because you've spoken a lot around co-production. And someone said, you know, co-production is often seen as quite an expensive investment and a little bit of a luxury. So how do we change that attitude across the whole system to really promote that?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, I guess. I do think some of it comes back to data. So as I said at the start, often when we're surveying communities, we're not really asking communities for information about things like their sexuality, their gender identity, their class status, whether they're in receipt of benefits, their disability, their neurodiversity. We're not asking about any of that in any detail. And therefore, when a funder comes to us and says, you know, we want to fund this project of work, often it's difficult for us. We're moving towards a model of co-production. One of the really core things that we can do to solidify that is collect the data. And LGBT Foundation's done a lot of work on this. We have an inclusive data monitoring guide that you're welcome to access on our website. We also have a community action network where we have a pool of queer people who are engaged in research as a form of activism. So we have a really engaged pool of people there that can give their experiences to any sort of research that you want to conduct as an organization. So yeah, I think data for me is the most important part of making that argument for co-production.
Absolutely, thank you. Thanks so much, Finn. I think there's another set of data, and the data is that actually there's a cost of not doing it. And we've seen the cost of not doing it, where we've gone in and think we know best and we've put something in place, that build it and they will come attitude, and it hasn't worked. So actually the cost benefit of doing it is greater because it starts with listening, and that not that communities are hard to reach, it's that sometimes we're hard to reach. And it's about placing ourselves in those contexts so that we are listening, and that co-production comes from that co-creation, co-design, co-activation. So it doesn't just stop at one of those co's, it follows it through, because then you'll see the greater reward of who is then engaged and using what has been positioned there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had a couple of questions come in around almost why is the conversation today around traditional sport? You know, we know that sport exists as part of that wider ecosystem, sport, physical activity, movement. And if our objective is just to get more people moving, then why sport when we know that for some people maybe they've had negative experiences of sport growing up? It doesn't necessarily evoke kind of positive experiences. So I guess first question is, why does traditional sport matter as a distinct kind of thing? And I guess another question is, how do we shout about that as well, and how do we champion the positive impact it can have? So does anyone want to kick us off? Yeah, Pritesh.
I guess we talk about traditional sports, but it can have so many different forms. You know, through Football, the Football Foundation, Sporting, they've been pretty brave in terms of funding Active Through Football and not saying everything has to be football in the traditional sense. So in Oldham, you know, we're working in a small geographical area called West Oldham, a small kind of corridor there. And we know everyone doesn't want to play football. The Football Foundation know everyone don't want to play football, but actually their remit is to try and get people actually, yes, playing football, but they're working with other national governing bodies now to look at that multi-sport kind of offer. If we talk about football, you know, in Oldham we're doing things like you saw our mental health football, which is very different to just traditional football. They don't keep score, it's less competitive. We've got walking football for those who are a bit older. We've even got things like soccer size. So we are talking about sport today, but I guess it's challenging ourselves to think of it in lots of different forms. Because actually sport is good for a lot of people. You know, Holly talked really passionate about her story and her journey about football. But there are different forms of traditional sport that people can enjoy that don't need to be competitive. It doesn't need to be, I guess, how you see it, you know. So I guess that's a bit of learning, a bit of challenge back. Don't think of it in its traditional senses. Try and being creative. You talked about Sally being creative and being innovative. Think of different ways. I think at the start of some of our Active for Football sessions, it was just that the football was introduced there. They weren't playing football, but it was introduced. It might have been throwing and catching with it. But so there's different ways of going around it. But we just want people to enjoy activity, whether, you know, that's sport or otherwise. So yeah, I guess a bit of learning.
Yeah, absolutely. And it might not always start with sport, but I guess it's that listening piece, isn't it? And actually that might be the end product for some people in communities. It might not be. But I think it's just that awareness of sometimes of what sports are available. And I'm keen to bring one of you two in, because I know you're both very passionate about your own sports. And Khadija, you do loads with different governing bodies and to really expose your participants to different sports and the different possibilities. So do you want to come in on that one?
So on that, it's like Pritesh says about introducing the sport. So it doesn't have to be football, it doesn't have to be netball, but giving them that opportunity to access something. We predominantly look at, not predominantly, but we do a lot of Sunnah sports. So we bring religion into the mix. That, you know, swimming is a Sunnah, horse riding is a Sunnah, walking, running. You know, looking after your physical. So when you bring religion into it, you know, Islam does teach us about, you know, being physically well, mentally well, spiritually well, emotionally well. So it all adds into it. But ultimately they are becoming physically active. So it doesn't mean they have to be doing a certain thing. Even like looking after a horse, grooming, caring for them. You might not want to ride the horse, but you're looking after the horse, and that's your mental well-being as well, isn't it? So alongside the physical aspect, we're looking at your well-being, your mental aspect, your spiritual, emotional, you know, being with friends and family, you know, and having that informal conversations. It all plays a big part.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've touched on it there. It's not just about playing sport. We might have had those negative experiences of playing sport, but there are so many different roles available to people. And it's just finding that way that works for them, I think. Shannon?
Yeah, and I think going back to an earlier point, for us at UK Desport, we have traditionally looked at sport, but again, we've tried to look at different angles. So a good example, we've created a new children and young people's programme called Destination Deaf Olympics. So we know deaf children are twice as likely to be inactive in comparison to their hearing peers. So we've created a programme specifically for deaf children, working with the education system. So it's weaved into curriculum. So again, when we're thinking about that active school day, thinking about how children can be active that way. The programme is a set of cards that are all loosely linked to a sport, but again, is not the actual sport. So if you think of, for example, a basketball card, at no point in there is there a basketball hoop involved, but it's more around just that throwing and catching and elements of the sport, rather than expecting people who have never delivered sport and physical activity to a classroom of children to be able to go and do that. We're looking more at those skills for children to learn. And then if they do want to then continue into community sport, they've embedded those skills within what they're doing to then be able to go into that. But you know, we're looking for, and hopefully find through this programme, some of the Deaf Olympians of the future inspired to be involved in sport, but we know not everyone will be, and it's just finding that appropriate level for everyone to be involved.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you, everybody, and thanks for the question. They're great responses, and it is about people first, and it's about those different starting points that people are at. And just a couple of things from me, as well as being at the board at Great Manchester Move, and I'm place director North West for Street Games UK, and we have an end game. The last bit of that end game is changing the nature of mainstream sport. And indeed, we do have this lens on sport. Of course we do, in the more traditional sports, because they've been around often a long time and have built and have got the investments in many cases and so on. But in changing that and diversifying it, it is about that multi-sports offer back to starting where people are at. And I'll just give you a very quick example from last year's Pride Youth Games that were in Lancaster, where the most popular activity was mindful sewing. And every young person joined in mindful sewing. Why? Because it started to build trust, and it was in small groups, and they started to make friends with people they'd not met before. And they started then to feel that they could have a go at the sports. But time and time again, that session was full, and we've kept it in because it is about the scaffolding that had to be there at a pace that worked for those young people, so they could then join in on all sorts of things that included traditional sports and less traditional sports like parkour.
Amazing. Thanks, Sally. Thank you so much for all your questions. We won't have time to get through all of them, but come and grab any of us throughout the day. I'm sure we'll be more than happy to have a chat, and we can try and follow up afterwards as well. But yeah, I think we'll wrap up, and I think we'll just do a bit of an along the line, like what's resonated from today, what are you taking away with you from this session? I think we'll start with Finn this time.
Put me on the spot there. I think for me, the key point is that the kind of barriers that we face are the same. And I think we have a lot more in common as communities who are often underserved by mainstream facilities, organizations, services, funders, etc. I think there's a lot more there in common than what divides us, particularly when we look at things like the news recently. It can seem like there's never-ending flame wars about different topics, and I want us all to be reminded that, you know, we're kind of all in this together. We all have skin in the game, and we all need to fight for inclusion for all. So, yeah.
Love that. Thanks, Finn.
I think for me, some of the things that have come out from all of us today, I guess, working alongside our communities to really, really understand them, to meet them where they are and they feel safe. I know Tim Hollingsworth, I think in one of his first trips out to the north, he talked about earlier, where he came to Oldham and he met Majid from our Ghazali Trust community group. And I think it was Tim who mentioned about communities being hard to reach, and Majid said, no, they're not hard to reach. These communities have been here for 20 plus years. It's about how we engage with them. We go to them and find out what's important to them. So I think that's one of the big things for me today. The other thing is about collaboration. How do we get people together? I think, Sally, the question you posed before about investment, what we're trying to do in Oldham is what we have done through the local pilot is we've brought community groups together who maybe previously had competed for the same funding pot. At the end of the day, they're working in the same community to improve the health, well-being, and improve the lives of their community. So we brought them together, and now they're jointly seeking funding. You know, that funding is probably goes further, but it's serving the same communities and being less competitive. And it's been a rocky road, that, but you know it's proven fruitful. To kind of, they're all trying to do the same thing. So yeah, something to take away, I think.
Amazing. Khadija?
For me, key takeaway is let's talk, let's educate each other. We've got learning to do from you guys. NGB's an open invitation to come and have a conversation. To Bolton, come to Bolton, and let's visit one of our sessions and see what the communities, how the communities are, what they need. So let's learn together. Just touching on Pritesh's point about collaboration is very, very important. Partnership working, because I say all the time, we're not in competition. We're in, we should be working in collaboration with each other.
I think for me, it's that commitment from everyone here and us as a sector to really work together to empower those who have never had the opportunities before to be involved in sport and physical activity, whether that's as a participant, as a leader, as a coach, in any role. But yeah, let's think about how we can make sure that they feel seen, heard, and just represented in our space, really.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thanks so much. Thanks everybody for your summaries. It's been brilliant, as I say, a privilege to listen in. And I think some of the key messages that have come through time and time again from today's panel is the value of listening. And that's listening. It's not waiting to speak. It's stop and listen and go deeper and ask the curious questions. It's also a recognition of diversity. Our communities are diverse and they will become increasingly diverse. So it's also something about yourself, the mirror to yourself. What lens are you coming into this work with? Have you got a particular attitude that needs to be more embracing? There's something about how do we best then position our collaborations, our resources, so that we can better serve and we think a little bit more. We think poverty proofing, we think scaffolding, we think actually let's just start somewhere else with these activities so they work for people. And of course, in all of this, we've got this intersectional lens on it, recognise intersectional discrimination exists and just check ourselves, be the allies, be the advocate, so that this movement for movement is for everybody across Greater Manchester. And we're influencing beyond, because we all know in this room how good it feels when you've done some physical activity, when you've done some sport, when you've done some movement. And that's what we want to build on, and we really want to embrace this. So I guess from ourselves today, we are really grateful for you listening, for your participation, for your contributions. Thank you so much. And thanks to Holly for co-hosting today. It's been a pleasure to work alongside you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a joy, Sally. So yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Yeah, I've really appreciated your listening and your great questions. And just a massive thank you to our panel. Can we have a round of applause for our fantastic panel, please? So yeah, lots to take away, lots to think about over lunch. Like I say, come and connect with us, come and chat with us. I'll just head up here because we've just got a QR code for some feedback. So if you do want to leave some feedback on the session, that would be fantastic. And yeah, just get yourselves outside, head for some lunch. There's lots of different sports taking place outside. We've got some archery, some skateboarding, some 3v3 football. So yeah, that would be our kind of call to action is go and try something new. And yeah, thank you so much for your time this morning.